I'm quite disappointed to see that you're still stuck with paper and pencil tests where you're bubbling in an answer. What is the consideration for, and I know this is pie in the sky, although 20 years ago I was working for the state, working on developing performance task tests. Where does that stand? That does test critical thinking.
Yes.
Very much so.
Right.
And can be expressed it can be designed to be expressed in easy to correct things. But when you present a student or a group of students, and I know that's blasphemous to say, let them work together, which is what they do in industry.
Exactly, yeah.
What is wrong with looking to that model of a performance task test where there is truly a problem to solve rather than paper and pencil?
Thank you for that comment. And I think that one of the distinctions I want to make here is that we chose to do paper and pencil basically for research reasons. We were trying to document the way the students were answering the questions, and we just needed to focus on one thing at a time. We were trying to understand the knowledge we were eliciting. So the paper and pencil choice was because we were trying to develop that documentation of all the features of our assessments and how they were working. So here's what I want to say to you to pivot to your answering your question. If you're going to spend a lot of money doing performance tasks, let's say online type tasks, you need to architect them very well. And so what we've created is an architecture that can be used. It could be used for multiple choice. It could be used for performance task. It could be used for any of those. Like the way you do the assessment, as long as you've got the specifications of what it is that students do and how they show evidence of the knowledge, you can pick whatever modality you want. So I think, I guess the real issue is that faculty would need to have access to resources like that. In other words, I can't expect faculty to be designing these kinds of assessments, these performance tasks. They need to be well designed, and then they can use them, and they have to be able to score them, as you say, easily. That's the big task. But one of my former colleagues who did a lot of work around performance assessment, again, it's a problem of uptake and adoption. I think there's a lot of understanding that really is a wonderful way to go. But it can be quite labor intensive. And so you back into that resource issue again. I have way too many students, right? And I can't, And also when you get into group scoring and you're looking at lots of students doing lots of things, then you start running into issues about how can I really know what each individual student is contributing? So these are all design problems, and you want to make sure that you're making the right inferences about certain individuals, because at the end of the day they get grades, and those grades are given individually. Yeah. But no, I hope you're not walking away thinking that we're opposed to performance assessment or anything like that. What we're trying to do is give you the architecture that could allow that kind of thing someday. Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your comment. Yes?
Did you ever try to compare the way we teach here, the way we test here, to other countries, putting more emphasis maybe on the tools to be able to learn a subject than the logic? I come from a completely different environment, where from a French school, where the emphasis was more on the tools, and not the logic came later, but first the tools. And I know that in some of our students in colleges and universities even, they don't have the tools even. I mean, tools, I mean like even writing, like communicating in that. Did you ever compare it to other countries to see what they do, or What they don't
No,
do?
I personally haven't done that kind of research.
Do they do it at
And I think,
SOI?
I'm trying to think how to answer that question. I think one of the big international tests, the PISA test, that is, I mean, they're using more with, ICT type tasks where you have sort of an interactive performance task that you're doing on the computer. And you're using virtually different tools. And they're much more complex tasks. And they tend to, the European students tend to do a lot better on those than the American students. So I know that that is one comparison I have seen in terms of the results. But with respect to how they actually test in other countries, the one series of studies I'm familiar with is Jim Stigler's work at UCLA, who's looked at Japan and China and how they teach mathematics, for example. And it is just, all I can say is a whole different ballgame. But he's looking at, elementary, secondary school. He isn't looking at college. When you look at college, and again, internationally, I think they have vocational type schools, right? And then they have these very academic type schools. But college is really often a lecture. And there isn't a lot of working with tools unless you're in you get the occasional lab in the science class where you get to kind of touch things. But you sit through that lecture first, or 3 or 4 of them, So, and again, I think it has to just do with the numbers of students. Japan, it's interesting in elementary school, they're working with very large classes. I know we have this sort of focus in this country on small class size is always the best thing. They actually have rather larger classes in Japan. And what happens is they have sort of a group process where the teacher is getting the whole class to be reasoning through math problems together in a very participatory way. So it works with a large group. And she's assessing in that activity in a very formative way. She's getting to see what people know and what they don't know, and then she can take it up more directly. It's a very effective approach. But again, in this country, there's a certain amount of resistance to scripting lessons. Japanese instructors work together. They script them together. They buy into the script. In this country, what I do in my classroom, stay away. I do it my way, you do it your way, that kind of thing. So, different cultures.
I arrived 15 minutes late. I don't know the field to the extent where I can use the right language in asking the questions, but there's an issue that's so large that I think it's worth trying to ask, and that's the whole automated internet-based education that classes that are being offered by major universities,
Yeah.
The Khan Academy, individualized learning.
Yeah.
But what's missing, as I hear it, read about those things, is the assessment, the
Yes.
testing.
That's right.
Can you tell me about, I think what you're doing is relevant to that, but not aligned with the same goal. Could you say something about the state of the art? Where are the likely breakthroughs to mass testing?
Yeah, in those settings, that is an unsolved problem. It's very much on our radar screen as something that we have expertise to bring to bear. And in fact, I was just talking with one of my colleagues today. Another one of my colleagues is doing an evaluation of Khan Academy. And I have other colleagues, like my colleague Geneva Hartle, who is looking at MOOCs and how do you credential people? How do you certify, particularly for adult learning? People don't have time. They don't want to take a lot of their lives out to go back to college. So this online option is very compelling to them. But you need to have some ways of tapping into what they're doing to know that they've really learned something. I think there's some concerns about cheating and that sort of thing too. So all I can tell you is that this evidence-centered design approach, again, what I was calling sort of the secret sauce, it's a tremendous tool for specifying in any domain what it is. What is it to be skillful? And in what way are you being skillful? And what's important to know? And you can get a lot of input from industry people, from the academic people. And if you follow that roadmap, I'm sure they can solve that problem. They'll come up with some assessments that are online. Maybe some of them will be online performance tasks. Maybe some of them will be some very strategically designed multiple choice items. But there are a lot of ways you can solve that problem. You just have to have it specified well.
I'm very glad to hear you're working on it.
Yeah.
So we have time for one more question. Dr. Yarnall, thank you very much. This has been an excellent presentation and a really informative and focused Q&A. So could you wrap this up?
Yes, I was just going to comment on that last question, and that is natural language development will certainly help with online assessment. But the question I wanted to ask was, I finally think I'm catching on that what you're doing is assessment of assessment. And,
Yes, yes. I haven't heard it put that way, but I think that's probably accurate, yeah.
And I'm wondering what the ultimate implication of that is for education. I mean, should we be going back to the way I was starting my college education over 60 years ago, and the way that Aristotle did it 4,000 years ago, and that is teaching logic before we teach content?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're going back to the critical thinking idea.
Is that a real implication of what you're doing?
I think, going back to, Socratic method or Socrates, I mean, that whole notion of really giving people a chance to reason through the different aspects of a problem and applying the principles, that really is the way to go. I think the problem is with this sort of industrial model of education that has fallen away. But there have to be, with the technologies we have, with the ways we are specifying things very well. I mean, I do think it's a problem that can be solved, but it is a problem right now. We haven't solved it yet.
Dr. Yarnall, thank you very much. This has been an
Thank you,
absolutely
John. Thank you for
great
coming.
evening.